Everyone, and we are recording. So welcome everyone. I am really excited to welcome you to the opening program of NPW's three-part Nonprofit Strength Series. From senior care, mental health treatment, and childcare to everywhere in between, the demand for nonprofit expertise increases daily. Every resident is touched by and benefits from a strong nonprofit sector. Today's focus will be on reframing perspectives and practices that weaken our operations and therefore compromise our ability to provide the best possible services and care to all people in need. Our goal is to take some courageous steps forward through this series and engage our nonprofits and other stakeholders in learning designed to make needed changes that will strengthen our work and ultimately the social and economic fabric of our society. This has truly been a labor of love and a lot of work for our presenters, and I'm so thankful to them. Lauren Candela-Katz, Chief Development Officer at Lifting Up Westchester, and Michael Goldman, Chief Financial Officer at the Child Care Council of Westchester. I really cannot thank you enough. We've been working on this together for a number of months, and I think it's an exceptional presentation. So thank you both. Next slide, please. We are NPW. Our mission is to strengthen the nonprofit sector. We are as strong as our member organizations, and I thank all the nonprofits in Westchester County and New York State for the work you do in fortifying our communities, and I thank you for your membership as well. Next slide. And if you're not a member, please consider joining. Thank you. Today's series sponsors, we're again so thankful to the nonprofits and the businesses that choose to invest in the work of the nonprofit sector. So thank you, Accreditation Guru, Canon, Hudson Valley Credit Union, Mutual of America, and as always, our main partner in everything we do, the Westchester Library System. Next slide. And to our NPW sponsors, again, thank you for investing in the work we do and in our work to strengthen the sector. And again, we are so thankful to Lifting Up Westchester and to the Child Care Council of Westchester for the time that they've given to make this presentation happen. We are going to send out these PowerPoints. This PowerPoint, so you'll get to read more about Lifting Up Westchester, and which is a force in providing stable housing in our county. And next slide, and the Child Care Council as well in being the champion for the healthy development of children and families in our community. So with that, I think that the presentation will begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. So first, thank you to NPW, to Jan, Suzanne, and Amy for having us today. And thank you all for attending. We appreciate the audience, and hopefully the good turnout is an indication that others see the same problem that we do. So that's great. So I'm glad you're all here. So I want to start first by sort of defining the issue, because I know different people coming from somewhat different backgrounds here and different perspectives. So what is overhead? Overhead is often called admin. You may hear people talk about admin. They may say overhead. They may say admin and overhead, those types of things. And generally speaking, people would think about admin or overhead as being costs that don't neatly fit into other categories, such as fundraising and program. So just look at the general definition there. Is generally defined as a combination of management, general, and fundraising, but based on the Form 990, a nonprofit has those three categories. So there's program costs, management in general, which is the admin that we're talking about, and fundraising. Your fundraising costs, everybody knows what they are. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Involves seeking, soliciting, or securing charitable contributions. Program costs are those incurred in connection with a specific program. Now, program costs can be a little trickier. It depends upon the size of your organization. It also depends upon how complex the organization is. So if you just have one program, if you're a small nonprofit, you have one program that you run, it's very simple. You have people who are working on the program are dedicated to that program, and all costs associated with that get charged, or program costs getting charged to that specific program. When I give examples here today, I find for me, and hopefully for you as well, a lot of the examples, it's easiest for me to just do it with our own organization. So we have many different programs here at the Child Care Council of Westchester. We have a contract that involves registration of programs. We have others that involve scholarship programs. So let's just use those two basics programs. So someone who spends 100% of their time on our registration contract, our registration program, and they need a pen, they buy a pen, it gets charged to that contract. Okay. If someone works on that contract as well as the scholarship contract and they need a pen, then I have to allocate that cost based upon their normal participation in those two programs, or 3 programs, or 4 programs, or more, depending on what they do. Now, obviously, that's kind of an extreme case with the pen, because it's really cumbersome to allocate a 29-cent pen, and we generally discourage our employees from making purchases of 29 cents. But in a more realistic example, you're talking about buying a desk, buying a computer, or allocating rent, which is for most nonprofits is their biggest non-personnel cost. You could also allocate personnel costs across programs in the same way. And our employees, and the proper way to do it, I believe, is to fill out time cards, allocating their time. So these are all program costs. Some are direct to one program, some go to others. And then your last category is management in general. And that's where I was talking about before, all of the costs that are needed to operate an organization and are shared across programs. What we tend to do here, and many different organizations may do it differently, exactly how they allocate it. We tend to use our management in general to typically be the personnel costs of those associate that are administrative. For instance, our executive director, my salary as chief financial officer, the bookkeeper, the receptionist, the office manager. It's very hard, and according to, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but the CFR, which is kind of the multi-thousand-page rule book that we must follow in allocating costs, you have to be either administrative or program. You can't really be both, except in rare exceptions, which I don't want to go into. So, for instance, in my day, it's really, there are certain things I do that are specific to contracts, but most of what I do involves the organization as a whole. Same for the executive director, bookkeeper, etc. Therefore, we define those as administrative. They go into the administrative pool that gets allocated across contracts. That is the definition of overhead. Now we're going to go into what's going on there and what is happening and why are we really not funded properly, and how we have this need to reframe the discussion. So the problem is that the low administrative and overhead ratio has historically been valued by funding partners as a sign of organizational effectiveness and prudent financial management. And I think we've all heard that. You've heard funders say, I'd love to make a contribution. What's your admin rate? How much goes to program? And then you see the things that make us want to pull our hair out, those of us in the nonprofit industry, when you see others say 100% of our funding goes towards programs. Really? So you don't have an office? You don't have any paid employees that are not dedicated to the program? So those things are problems, and we'll get into that aspect a little bit more as we go. We've we all have to get an administrative and overhead rate to apply to the contracts. And what that is it's a rate that they apply to the other costs, and you take a percentage of your other costs, and that's what they give you to pay for your administration and overhead, those costs that I've talked about before. Well, how do you get a rate? Well, there's something called a NICRA, which is a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement. If you have direct federal funding, you can apply for a NICRA and you get a rate, and there's a whole formula that you use, and you submit it and you negotiate with what's called the cognizant agency, the agency of the federal government that gives you the majority of your direct federal funding. You come up with a rate, and most funders will accept that. Most government funders will accept that. The problem is, and I don't know the exact numbers, but many, if not most nonprofits, certainly small nonprofits, don't have direct federal funding. We have one contract that's considered direct federal funding, and they wouldn't negotiate the rate with us. We tried and tried and tried. We can't get a NICRA. So what are we left with? We are left with government contracts that say, well, if you don't have a NICRA, you can only have 10%. We have some that let us do 15. We have some that let us do what would be our NICRA, our calculated rate that represents our real overhead. But if our real overhead rate, and I'll tell you, ours is 25% of our direct costs, but they're only allowing us, some of the programs, to take 10%. Well, what's happening with the rest of it? We have to fill the hole somewhere to pay for those. So it's resulting in a capped or allowable administrative and overhead costs that are far below the actual verifiable expenses of delivering services. And in our case, as I said, we just use a very conservative methodology and only charge those costs that are for personnel that aren't directly allocated to the contracts. And we still have that 15% gap between our real rate and what they're allowing us. So what ends up happening, this approach keeps societal challenges at a status quo level because there isn't enough money to do the work that we need to do effectively. It limits lasting change and human potential, and the most positive program outcomes are all limited by this lack of funding. There are funding gaps. It weakens nonprofit financial infrastructure, and of course, suppresses compensation. And I'm sure a lot of us on this call can relate to that aspect. So,
okay, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Michael. And thank you to Jan and everybody at NPW. So we're going to take a few minutes to show you this video. Everyone deserves a fair slice. And I'm sure many of you have seen this video before, and you're going to chuckle because there is an uncomfortable truth when you watch this video. But pay close attention because it really crystallizes the challenges that Michael was alluding to and that we all face in this sector.
Have a great day. Hi. What can I do for you today, sir?
Hi, my name is John. I appreciate what you do for this neighborhood. Your pizza is making a difference.
Well, thank you, John. You know, when we opened, we were just a small shop with a simple mission to...
Right. Listen, I represent a large institution, and we're interested in buying a significant number of your pizzas.
Oh, okay, great. Well, our cheese pizzas are $10.
Great.
And then
I've done some number crunching and determined that we're going to need 10 per month, and I can pay $8 per pie. Oh, and I'll need them to be Sicilian.
Oh, but the Sicilian pies are more expensive. That won't cover my costs.
Oh, I'm sure you can just find someone who will be willing to make up the difference.
Who?
Well, maybe do a couple black tie events, you know, honor some people.
I'm concerned about the impact on quality at that price. And, you know, my reputation is at stake.
Of course, but just imagine how much more efficient you would be with 20% less than what you should be given. But I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of other pizza places around here. I mean, if it's too much work.
It's okay. You know what? I've got an oven that's been on the fritz, and maybe the steady business will help pay for repairs.
Oh, I would love to help with that, but 100% of what we give to you must be spent on ingredients, okay? We do not pay for overhead, okay? See, none of this money can be used for utilities, rent, marketing, pizza boxes, or your salary. Especially not your salary, no.
No pizza boxes? And how am I supposed to deliver them?
Oh, well, there's a place in Bushwick that is completely sustainable. They deliver your pizza using solar-powered drones on recycle bins.
I don't have those.
Okay. You can spend 5% on pizza boxes, 10% on dough, 5% on tomatoes, 10% on cheese, and the rest on spices. See, it's all spelled out here in this pizza-making plan.
I'm the one who knows how to make the pizzas.
Yeah, no, of course. What you want to do is just fill out this paperwork, okay? You make any of the stipulated adjustments to your business model, and then after a few site visits and several audits, payments should start rolling in about 6 to 9 months.
A site visit?
Yeah. As you see here on page 47, okay, your chef will either have to have been nominated for a James Beard Award, competed on Iron Chef, or taken anger management classes from Gordon Ramsay.
I serve pizzas. A James Beard Award, huh? Most of my cooks can't even grow a beard.
Hi.
Oh, hey. Where did that other guy go that was just here?
He got transferred to a different department. I'll be making the orders now.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. His expectations are a bit, unreasonable.
You're telling me. You saw.
I know, right? So I would like 4 dozen falafel sandwiches.
Oh, we don't make falafel sandwiches.
Well, that's what we need. And I also need you to track each and every one of your expenses on this ancient scroll. Use the feather pen. It has the blue ink. Nice to meet you. And really, you are making a difference with each falafel sandwich.
Yeah.
That's you don't have to put up with that. You and other pizza places are providing a valuable service to our community, and we should be backing you up and not making you jump through hoops. Listen, I would like to order a large supreme pizza, and someone told me that you have an oven on the fritz, so here is $100 to go towards fixing that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you come back.
No, absolutely not. I only buy pizza from the same pizza place once, because otherwise I keep coming back, you get dependent on me, and that would be so.
Oh. Okay.
Okay, Jan?
Yeah, so welcome back, everyone. I do want to give a caveat here. We here in Westchester have wonderful relationships with our funders who are working really hard to make adjustments, to work together with us to change what we all know are cumbersome standards. So, but what we do want to ask is to please share any of your thoughts with us. Amy, if we could just take down the slide for a minute and just see everybody's face. If somebody, if you want to put your reactions to this video, either in the chat or raise your hand and share any of your thoughts, we welcome that. We're going to make a little time for that. If anyone is bold enough to share any of your thoughts, if you know how to use the hand raise, that would be great. And if you don't, oh, we have Catherine Quinn. So please feel free to unmute yourself and share any thoughts that you might have.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Just to let you know, I've been the executive director of Support Connection for 27 years, since its very beginning. And aside from finding the video very comical in a way, but because of the reality of it, one of the things I find is a great challenge when you're presented with opportunities for funding and the program needs to be a new program that you've never had before. You have to be able to sustain it for years to come. But then oftentimes the reality of what the money you're given to begin the program is not even possible to continue sustaining the program. So I think we all have faced the same challenges, but that is something I would like to see some change. Many of us, our Support Connection offers support services for people with breast, ovarian, and gynecological cancer. The programs that we offer are solid and effective, and I would love to see how we could make more change to be able to sustain our own programs. And I think many, and I have been on the other side, having approved grants for different organizations, and there's some kind of a myth, I believe, that if you just keep creating new programs, that is more beneficial than sustaining the very critical programs that we all offer.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes nonprofits are put into positions where they follow the money because they want to make sure that their staff still has jobs, and sometimes we're incentivized to do things that we don't necessarily want to do, and don't in fact strengthen our operations.
Mm-hmm.
Just because we receive more money doesn't mean that we're strengthening our organizations. Oftentimes it just means that we're inheriting new deficits. And so that is definitely a problem. And it does create what we call the scarcity mentality, which we will be addressing in the third program in this series. So thank you, Catherine. Nancy Miller.
Hi, thanks so much, Jan. I'm the CEO of Vision Services for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and I'm proud to say I'm a board member of Human Services Council. So I have actually seen that video before. But I want to bring up another issue where some of my state grants are outcome funded, meaning that you don't have a personnel line, you don't have a line item budget, you're paid on the basis of your participant or your client achieving a certain skill. And while I was part of the group that created it in 1984, I have to tell you that we have not had an increase in state funding for serving the older blind population for over 15 years. Now, that is not sustainable. And again, the state cries poverty. They come up with all kinds of reasons why they can't increase our reimbursement. But it goes beyond even the overhead myth. It's a myth that somehow nonprofits can function differently than any other business. And I think that's where we get caught in being on a treadmill of having to constantly raise more money to do the same quality services over time without an understanding that our expenses go up. And with the inflation rate and all of the problems with COVID, most of us only survived, or many of us only survived, because we were able to get a PPP loan that was eventually forgiven. And that was an emergency. What about the day-to-day survival of nonprofits that are expected to provide a certain level of service and are given no increases in reimbursement for decades?
Thank you, Nancy. And just for everybody on this Zoom to know, NPW will be doing some intensive advocacy around this particular issue with the state in 2024. I'm going to hand this back over. I don't see any other hands raised. Thank you, Catherine and Nancy, and the people who put comments in the chat, which we will review as well. Thank you for your comments, which are so important. And now I'm going to hand this back over to our presenters. And Lauren, I think you're up.
Great. Actually, Michael is up.
Yep.
Oh,
Alright.
sorry about that.
It's okay. We've identified the problem. So I guess we need to identify the solution. And, you know, fortunately, we got the solution. We'll lay it out over the next we got hour, and then it'll all be fixed. If only that were true. So we do have what we think is some constructive ideas to help move the discussion forward. And over the rest of the presentation, this is the outline we will be using to discuss. So the first thing is new and accurate language to frame and define administrative and overhead expenses. If we keep talking the same, we're going to get the same. So we're going to reframe the language. I'm going to show you our ideas on what we think makes sense, and you know what Lauren's organization and my organization have already sort of put into place, and we hope others will follow. We'll discuss the critical questions and topics to help funders and nonprofits shift the discussion. And then collaborative methods. What can we all do to help advance this change? Because as we know, nonprofits make a stronger impact together.
Okay, so I'm going to take a leap and say that nothing you've heard so far is new, right? We are all experiencing these challenges in one way or another. And, you know, I want to say that it really wasn't until I started working with NPW on their, you know, equitable contracted campaign that I really realized that, holy moly, we really actually have to do something differently. We cannot keep talking the same way. And I think that that really is the power of being part of an organization like NPW, where we can build these coalitions, where there's safety in numbers, where we can challenge the way that we are all thinking and have been doing things, you know, the same way over and over and over for years and years and years. So, you know, I wanted to put that out there and to say that we are all coming to this conversation today, to this space today, very, very humbly. Very, very humbly, because we have all done this. And it really, again, wasn't until, you know, Jan shared a blog from a CPA who suggested like another model that, you know, the bells started ringing in my head that we can envision a new way to talk about what we're doing. So it's our hope today that we can, you know, challenge, you know, you to think differently, and that we can all move forward together. Because I think that when we start doing things consistently across the field, that's when we're going to make progress and make some headway. So what do we mean about talking the same? This is the pizza slice that you just saw in the video. So it maintains that overhead myth is just, it's bad to have admin and fundraising. Programs is the only way to go. It perpetuates that a smaller admin and fundraising, you know, percentage is maybe your organization is a better run organization. It's a more effective organization, when we know that that is not often the case. It perpetuates that starvation cycle that, you know, we shouldn't be investing. We shouldn't have capacity to do things. And so then we don't. And then what are the outcomes for our clients and the programs that we run? And it really fails to recognize that a lot of the costs of admin are the result of requirements, A, to actually be a nonprofit organization, and B, very often there's funding requirements from the government contracts that we received. In order to administer those contracts, they are finance heavy, sometimes HR heavy, and just a lot of administrative burdens to administer those contracts. And then there are other very similar models, and they all kind of, follow that pizza slice. And again, while they're slightly more broken down, they still really don't do admin justice. It still kind of perpetuates that admin is not a good thing. And there's even other models that use words like getting the word out about the kids' needs, or training for our workers, management of volunteers, and other support to keep us on the top of our game. And the problem with that kind of language is that it really downplays the key role that admin and overhead really play in an organization. It's not transparent, and it really does not reflect the reality of how nonprofit organizations have to operate.
Okay, so we're going to reframe the discussion. We don't want this to look like we're taking away from programs by doing things that we know are important to strengthen our business. So we're going to reframe to change the game. Amy? There we go. Okay. So what if instead of admin, we call them core operating expenses or core mission? These are the expenses for administrative salaries, maintenance, repairs, and other essential expenses that don't necessarily fit into, neatly go into this program. So core operating expenses, boy, that sounds a lot better to me than admin, right? Core mission. This is what we have to do to run our business. And the justification here, I'll just read it: without the vital, foundational, and behind the scenes work and the ability to keep the lights on, technology functioning and ensure legal and government compliance, no other aspect of a nonprofit would be possible. Programs and services cannot be delivered without an organization driving the effort. Read that last line again, okay? Investing in core expenses ensures the effectiveness of these businesses. Having a solid core is essential to all businesses, okay? They're often seen as a positive in for-profit businesses, right? How many times have you heard, oh boy, look at them, they're investing in their future. We do it, we're frivolously wasting money, okay? They're paying for leadership. They've got, they paid up to get the best and brightest minds. Not a nonprofit, right? So very different approach, and those same, shareholders that want the for-profit business running well aren't going to donate because we're just framing it wrong. We're talking about the wrong thing when we're talking about those investments. So here's a different model: revisioning nonprofit overhead. What if instead of the pie chart, we had concentric circles, and now you see fundraising in the middle, core outside, and then you have shared direct costs and program-specific direct costs. Now it looks like, wow, look at those things that we used to call admin overhead, right? You've heard it used derisively. Oh, you're just overhead. You're not part of the business. You're just overhead. You're a drag. Well, now it's the core mission. It's at the center of what we do. Nothing else happens without our core. Okay. And as we talked about before, here are some of the direct expenses, right? Salaries, taxes, program supplies, any other program expenses. And then there's just shared program expenses, rent, utilities, technology, etc. And here are some of the expenses that go into your core. As we talked about before, human resources, right? I talked about our office manager, right? Finance, our bookkeeper, management salaries, executive director, chief financial officer, and the volunteer programs would be a good core expense that helps build up. But any costs with running that volunteer program aren't really directly applied to the program. Those are core expenses that help build it up. And then within the fundraising, there's direct and then there's core support. Again, those are normally talked about as unrestricted donations or restricted donations. I like this terminology much better. Someone is directly, instead of saying it's restricted for use there, it's directly supporting a program, or not unrestricted, because I'm sure in some people's mind, an unrestricted donation is like, great, that goes for pizza parties. No, it's core support. It strengthens the heart of the business when you're talking about a core support.
So today we wanted to raise, these critical questions to really shift the conversation. Why are there the same requirements for all nonprofits, despite vast differences in the size and scope of different nonprofit organizations? So as we talk today, put your shift-changing questions, in the chat. Next slide, Amy. So does it make sense to hold all nonprofits at this same low flat percentage for core expenses when everybody has a different size, has a different mission, has different facility operations, has different programs, has different staffing needs? Does it make sense to have these artificial caps? Often staff wear multiple hats in nonprofit organizations, and their titles don't necessarily, limit their scope of work in an organization. For example, as the Chief Development Officer for Lifting Up Westchester, I've been involved in, also applying for all of the government grants. I do the vouchering for the grants. I do strategic program planning for specific programs, and some site supervision. And so, because my title is Chief Development Officer, I'm stuck in the fundraising bucket. So there's got to be more of a recognition of the capacity of an organization where people wear multiple hats. I'm seeing some good questions come up in the chat. Jan, do you want to raise any of them?
I was just going to ask that. Yeah, I do see some really good questions. I want to start with Adam Rabinovich, about any insights into why we got here, this overhead myth, and understanding the history. I think that's a great question. I can start that if that's okay with you, Lauren and Michael.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so this is very systemic, and there's a long history. I think one of the most important things to understand is that nonprofits originally, many years ago, it was understood that nonprofits can deliver government mandated services that they have to provide by law, better, more expertly, and more efficiently than government. And what started as a really positive system of contracting with nonprofits became a very competitive system and really pushed nonprofits to compete against each other for contracts. This benefited larger nonprofits run by white people, and it really disadvantaged nonprofits run by people of color, by women who were trusted less with funding. So what was a very intelligent business relationship became very competitive, and unintentionally, I believe, became a system of suppression of wages, of quality, of a focus on innovation, and so many other things. And it's just gotten so carried away that we want to just stop and think and breathe and work with our government and foundation partners to get back to center and to get back to that understanding of why we came together in the first place and why nonprofit expertise is critical for our social and economic fabric, and make some really, really important changes, because at the end of the line, and we will discuss this, we have a workforce that is suffering. We have a workforce that is, our direct care workers are living too close to the poverty line. And we have nonprofit organizations whose infrastructures are severely weakened by this system. So it's in everybody's best interest that we understand why we came together at first and get back to that point. And Lauren, Michael, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, and that we have societal issues that are not going to get solved, period, because of the lack of investment.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. You've answered it well.
And I think, you know, the overhead myth, where I don't think the overhead myth came from nonprofits. I think nonprofits were somewhat too reactive to funders and public perceptions of what we should and should not do. I think there's a very common misconception that, unfortunately, this beggar and benefactor mentality that is often perpetuated by the business sector, and we love the business sector here in Westchester, but you know that we are in need of your help and your support because we don't do things efficiently. We spend too much money on this, we spend too much money on that. Partners thinking they know better than we do, and that we are not investing public money and foundation money well. But we ask you to trust us. We are doing it well. We are experts. We know what we're doing. And that's actually the next program that we're having in person on November 9th, which is trust-based philanthropy, trust-based funding. Are there any other questions, Lauren, Michael, that you see here, or comments that you want to respond to?
Well, just, you know, I just wanted to pick up on what you were saying, is that, you know, how often do we all hear, you know, nonprofits really need to operate like a business? You know, but businesses invest in research and development. They invest in marketing. They invest in their capacity. They invest in things that are going to make their, you know, company, their business successful. And, you know, like what Jan was saying, you know, we need to do the same in the nonprofit space, and our stakeholders need to trust us that we can do that.
So Lauren, why don't you continue, and we'll get to some comments and questions again in a little bit, so that we don't lose momentum here.
Right. You know, so again, I think, you know, it's really all about the investing, you know, as Jan was saying. Whoops, lost that slide. You know, to keep the lights on, to keep the roof from leaking. And, you know, we need to start talking about this and advocating, you know, with all of our stakeholders. And yesterday, you know, Jan, MPW had the advocacy session, which was really terrific. And a very common conversation at that workshop yesterday was that, you know, people are nervous because we all get these government grants and the competition, and if we say something, is it going to jeopardize our funding? And, you know, one of the points that we also discussed to kind of refute that was that, you know, the government is required to and mandated to provide many of these services that we as nonprofits provide in the community. So they are obligated to fund us. There are a limited number of nonprofits in the space who have the capacity to provide certain types of services and programs in the community. So I think, again, we have a little bit more power than we think we do, and certainly acting together as a coalition, we have even more power. We just have to start consistently using that power.
Okay, so what can we all do together, right? Because we, you know, if it's just Lauren's organization or my organization or an NPW, we all need to do it. We're all united. We all speak with one voice. It's going to make a difference. So, some specific ideas, collaborative methods to advance change. Okay, so I touched on it briefly before, the 100% gimmick, you know. And I'll admit, a few years ago, I fell victim to that one. We were doing a fundraising campaign to fund scholarships, and it's specific at our event that we were our annual fundraiser, and there was an ask where we said this is to raise scholarships, and 100% of the money goes to fund scholarships. And frankly, it was my idea. And now when I think about it, it's like, well, that was a stupid idea because it also wasn't true. Someone had to process the money coming in. My bookkeeper and I processed the money. You know, someone had to process the payments going out, decide who was getting the scholarships, who was doing. So we were just taking time away from, or taking time and money away from other programs that we fund and other administrative costs. So there was no way 100% was going there. My hourly rate, isn't that high, but it was something. So we were taking money away from this program. So it wasn't 100%. So, I feel bad. We were not being truthful when we said that. It was 100% of the direct cost, but it's not 100%. So start discussing the true cost of service for the majority of nonprofits that are delivering critical services. And actually, just another short anecdote, it happened yesterday. We have a sister agency, and we're all putting in our own budgets for a statewide contract for childcare. And as we put that in, I was talking to the executive director of another of the sister companies in another region of the state. And I was like, okay, so what are you guys doing with your budget with this, that? And we're just sort of comparing notes a little bit. And I said, and what about your rent? He said, oh, we're not asking them to pay for that. I was like, well, why not? And again, are you all going to sit in the parking lot? You're probably going to have a roof over your head when you do this. And they're not funding it. They're either paying for it someplace else, probably out of a different program that should be paying for it. And they really have to fully cost what everything is, what you're really paying for. Okay, so that's part of the issue. That's what you all need to start doing. Don't think you're gonna garner favor with some of these funders by just not charging your costs. That doesn't work for anybody. Okay. Again, stop talking about the low admin, bare bones budgets, doing more for less, low percentage of overhead. That doesn't work, and it doesn't help anybody, and it's not really true. And we changed the discussion from admin, low admin rates, to investing in nonprofits and the community. It's an investment in the core mission, not admin. Change the terminology. I'm going to show you a chart in a second, what was in our annual report and what was in Lifting Up Westchester's annual report this past year. And that is to stop using the old model and conversations with boards, donors, foundations, elected officials, move to the new model. And I was looking at the chat, and it seems like so far, those of you on here who've seen this for the first time, seems to be positively received, that you like that concentric circle model for your expenses. It looks a lot better. Okay. Yep. All right. I am going to need my glasses as we go through this. So this is the page, the one financial page that our PR person, our graphic designer, asked me for in the annual report, where we get to put what goes on with our finances. The revenue, we still use the pie chart, and I think it makes sense because no area is more or less important. So on the left side, we have the revenue pie chart, but you can see on the right side, we went away from the pie chart. We went to the concentric circle model, and right there in the middle is core mission. Now we still use parenthetically general and administrative expenses because, just sort of transitioning over. People aren't familiar yet. We hope that someday people won't talk about general administrative, they'll just talk about core mission. But until that time comes, it was important that they knew that was the old general administrative we now call core mission. That's what that is. And then our fundraising, then our program expenses on the outside. And this, instead of looking like we're taking money away to pay our admin, we are investing. It's in the center. We like this model. I actually think, Lauren, your organization did it better. Yours looks nicer on the next page. So why don't you go ahead with that?
Thanks, Michael. So we really took this to heart and implemented it in full, and distinguished with the colors, for the programs. But again, throughout this annual report, we incorporated all of the language that we have been talking here today, because we really feel that for all of our stakeholders, we have to start educating everybody. So at the top, you see investing in nonprofit core and fundraising expenses is savvy, prudent, and absolutely necessary. We let them know right up front that we are not embarrassed by our admin and fundraising expenses. Even on the other side, where we talk about unrestricted gifts, it's where it's needed most because it amplifies the impact of our mission. We are not making excuses for unrestricted giving either. It doesn't always have to be, so program directed. And I wanted to, go back and answer a couple questions, in the chat. When, we've had situations at Lifting Up Westchester where we've had a very big grant application for a very big program, and the requirements to run that program, when we did the whole budget analysis, and what they were funding for the program, we found that it was going to cost us another $150,000 to run that program that was not getting paid for by that government contract. And we did a lot of soul searching here, and we decided we couldn't do it. And we wrote a letter and said, thanks so much for the opportunity, to apply for this grant. We would have loved to continue because it's so important in the community. But unfortunately, it's going to cost us another $150,000 to operate this program based on all of your requirements. And we sent that letter off to them. Well, I'll be damned. Guess who came back to us, and said, oh, okay, we'll fund the difference. And so you really have to be thoughtful. You have to be assertive, prepared to lose a program because you never know. But you have to be willing to have those conversations. Every time I have a conversation with a funder or a stakeholder, we talk about these issues. If they ask me a question, I don't shy away. We have those transparent conversations because it's the only way we're going to make progress together.
Lauren, can I jump in?
Yeah.
So there's a comment here, an important comment from Christine Crody, and it says, for nonprofits that are dependent on government funding, this change will be very difficult, if not impossible. For nonprofits that prioritize private funding, this transition can work. And my reaction to that is this. I think it's a really important perspective. I would like to, again, switch it up. Government is dependent on nonprofit expertise to deliver services that they are mandated by law. And Lauren brought up a very good point. We have power. When we come together as a sector, we are used to thinking that we owe government, we owe our funders, we are partners, we are all together as equals, we trust each other. And nonprofits have to come together and use the power. Government needs us as much as at times a few elected officials or government representatives will say to us, okay, you want more? We'll just do the programs ourselves. We know that's an empty threat. We are experts. We do it. We need to come together. We need to show our power. We need to change the system. We need to also work with our foundations. They should want more too. And our individual philanthropists, they should want more too. They shouldn't want to fund the deficit that government leaves us. They should want to fund innovation and pilot projects and things that are going to improve outcomes. So that's my comment to that. And it's what Lauren said before. We have so much more power than we realize.
I work on the government grants all the time, and I do have conversations, with our partners, and even if they can't do anything about it at the moment, it's still important to start having those conversations, because eventually when we all start having them, that's going to put more pressure on them to look at things differently and do things differently.
I agree. And I think the important thing to just really stress is together. And that's why I'm so grateful that NPW has taken on this cause and started this discussion, because you're right. If it's, it's one thing to go to your one private funder, but I mean, I'll just tell a quick story. I've been doing this for 10 years. I came from the for-profit sector, and a couple of years in, one of our core contracts, I looked at it and I went to our executive director. I said, this doesn't make sense. This loses us money. Why are we doing this one? And with the mindset of the for-profit, I said, if I was back at my old job, I'd say, no, thank you. Now, as nonprofits, we understand, that we have a mission related job as well. So it's not just about making money. So we go on and we do that one, but we're subsidizing it with other sources of funding. But once we all start doing it together, and making some noise, that's how change gets made. Is it going to change? Is the admin rate going to go from 10% to 20% in 2024? No, it's not. But when you start making change on the fringes, and it'll happen, but we've got to stay committed to it.
Yeah.
And I have one more thing I want to jump in on, because this is a really good statement that Sean brought up, but it's not appearing, but I can address it. It's about the 990s and that being a sort of barrier to all of this. And I will say the important thing about your 990 is how you use it.
Yeah.
Funders look at 990s and our audited financial statements to judge our efficiency and cost effectiveness. I will tell everyone, your 990 has a narrative. You have the opportunity to explain everything in your 990, and that is the one part of the 990 that most nonprofits forget about. Use it, explain yourself, answer questions there, help the sector talk about the things that we're talking about now and change the narrative. That is an incredible tool to use to start speaking to funders through the 990 about reality and about what we need.
And I will add to that, you also have a section on your audited financial statement that is a summary of your programs that you can have a description there as well. So you can go online to Lifting Up Westchester and look up our annual report to see how else we have integrated this language in our donor impact report from 2022, if you are so inclined and interested. Next slide, Amy. So, Jan just talked about the 990 and, the audited financial statement, put in the chat if you have additional ideas, because that is awesome. We would love to learn more from you. Again, I would keep on sharing this Everyone Deserves a Fair Slice of video, with your stakeholders. Share it with your board once a year. Share it with, different groups so they understand why you have to do fundraising so much. Put it on, your social media. Get it out there. Let's inform the public. I cannot begin to tell you, it is pervasive out there. And if you want the boards to also become your advocates, you have to educate them. You have to educate your donor base as much as possible. And I really think that video does a really great job of doing that. And really, I think we've said most of this already. It's about getting involved and being proactive with this and making the change and just being more thoughtful about looking at all the ways we can make all these language adjustments. Because, when you really think about it, it's on your website. It's in your brochures, it's in your annual reports, it's in your 990s. There's a lot more that we can do to integrate this new language and to start advocating for ourselves. Even in the cover letters, when you send to grants, there's always ways to get in a little extra explanation of things. even maybe not applying for some grants. Like there's some grants where it's like that white unicorn that I just really want to get that grant, but they limit it so much, you know, maybe we all stop applying for that grant, you know, until that particular funder changes their ways, you know, and hears out what is going to be, you know, more successful and productive and beneficial for the nonprofit sector. We have power together.
Thank you. So we can, yeah, so again, this is, and we're going to open it up for questions and comments, so please stay on. But we have, this series has been very, very carefully curated. And the two programs that are coming up after this that are intersecting and overlapping are trust-based funding for nonprofits, which will be in person on November 9th, and will be nonprofit thrivability. There's a little issue on top. Trust-based funding will be from 9 to 9:30 with breakfast starting at 8:45. But I really encourage all of you to help us be a force for good, show up and attend the next two programs. And in 2024, we can be even stronger together. Next slide, please. We're going to do Q&A, and I think after this, Amy, could you hop to the next slide? Because I think I want everybody to know you will be getting this PowerPoint. You can Google I saw questions about the video. We will send out that link too, but if you need it before we get it out, you can just Google it. It's on YouTube, and you can find it. And we thank the Human Services Council for putting that together. They have some videos that are really amazing, and they're a great partner to us. But now I think we can close down the PowerPoint and look at the chat, open up for some comments and questions. And again, such a shout out to my colleagues, Lauren and Michael, for all the work that went into this. I think it's one of the most important conversations that all nonprofit stakeholders can have. Nancy Miller, I know that you had your hand raised before and we kept going with the slides. Is there something you want to ask or say at this point?
Yes, thank you, Jan. I think I think this was fantastic, and I plan to use the new language and the graphics in my own annual report. This has just been fantastic. But there's another piece of the pie that part of the reason I believe that we're treated the way we are is because there is not respect for the clientele that we serve. It's not only about nonprofit sector, but we are serving the most vulnerable, the most difficult to serve, the populations that are often discriminated against for a whole variety of reasons. And in this climate, with what's going on with immigration and what's going on with the craziness in Washington, that I think we have to remember that we're not only advocating for ourselves as a sector, which I think was done beautifully here, but we're advocating for people who often don't have their own voice. And that's part of our power as well.
Absolutely. And that is something we actually discussed yesterday. We did a nonprofit learning lab, and the topic was advocacy. And the group was really encouraged to go beyond the provision of services to being advocates and working with our clients and our boards and our other stakeholders to advocate for change. Because if we don't advocate for change, then we're providing important services and they keep people where they are or just a little bit above that. So thank you, Nancy, always for your important points. And thank you, Nancy, also, because we do talk about collective power and collective impact. Nancy is an advisory committee member for our disabilities affinity group at nonprofit Westchester, and has been an incredible source of learning for everybody on that committee and the community. We're going to go to Deborah, and then we're going to go to Mary Ellen.
Jen, before we go to Deborah, I just wanted to comment on Nancy's statement as well, because I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that, you know, part of changing the conversation is also changing about how we talk about our clients. And so what we have done here at Lifting Up Westchester is really, you know, when we're telling a client story, we're trying to really be respectful of their journey, and frame it in the systemic way that led to their circumstances. So that is one way that we are trying to change the way we talk about our clients. But the other way is also trying to help all of our stakeholders shrink the otherness between themselves and the people that we serve. You know, but for the grace of God, they had their situation in life that they were able to, you know, handle their challenges, but other people don't. And it doesn't mean that our clients are not just like them in so many ways. And when you can work on shrinking that otherness and building that connection between all of our stakeholders as human beings to another human being, that's where the magic starts to happen.
And Lauren, that's a brilliant point, and we do need to put it out there. You know, we have during these presentations and others discussed the impact of the social determinants of health and the impact of systemic racism in everything we're discussing. And the othering often shows its ugly head in terms of the racial divide, and in terms of ableism, sexism, and a lot of other isms. And with again, with clientele that are significantly people of color, and with a workforce that is 80% women and over 55% people of color at the direct care line, we do need to fight for our workforce. We do need to fight for the people that are day in and day out doing the work. And we do need to speak truth to power. We do need to discuss the racism that has, whether intentionally or unintentionally, gotten us to this point. And in our other conversations, we will continue this conversation in that framework. So Lauren, that was so beautifully said. Thank you. Michael, do you have anything to add in before we go to Deborah and then Mary Ellen?
No, go on to more questions. That's fine. Thanks.
Deborah?
Hey there. First of all, thank you so much for this. I think this has been such an excellent presentation. And frankly, I think you're doing just an incredible job of advocating and presenting all this material. And I'm saying this because I've seen some of this material presented before, the same material, but not nearly as well. And the reason I'm saying this is because I think that it's very important to liaise with some foundation affinity groups as well. Groups like Grant Makers in the Arts or Environmental Grant Makers Association, things like that, because there are funders who really care about the nonprofit sector, and they absolutely believe in this myth that they shouldn't be funding in quote unquote indirect costs. And I think that's starting to change. I am seeing some foundations too, and I'm saying this because it sounds like to me, I think you're right, there's more leverage with government, probably. But there are people who care in that world, and I'm saying this because I've been part of starting a couple of foundations, and one of them, the ED for the foundation, was a brilliant woman who was a very successful American Express executive. and really cared and really believed, again, that we have to make nonprofits more efficient by not investing in indirect funding. So I think that this presentation is outstanding and should be shared with national organizations that represent the nonprofit world, like AFP or the Council on Foundations or anything else, because I really think what you're doing here is kind of a cut above. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you so much.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. And again, I really want to acknowledge our relationship with our foundations here in Westchester. We are having these conversations, and we do have such amazing, caring foundations here. And I really do want to shout out the Westchester Community Foundation, United Way, Field Hall, and others. These are people that are, and institutions that are so committed to partnering with us and advancing the changes that we're talking about. And if I left any of the local foundations out, I apologize. Those are the three, that really come top of mind to me, because these conversations are not new to them at all. Mary Ellen, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Mary Ellen DeAndre, and I don't have an affiliation at the moment. Just waiting for that offer letter in the mail. So hopefully next time I'll have an affiliation that you all know. So at any rate, what I wanted to say was I'm a director of development professional, and I was recently with a food pantry in Virginia. I'm back in New York. I'm an original Hudson Valleyer. We actually wrote and said no to several grants this past January, February, and March to funders who normally would have funded us because of a few things. And it really killed me, but it goes to what we're saying. They changed the timing of when the funding had to be used. They changed the proportions of how the funding had to be used. And, we couldn't be buying from a farm and squash and apples and all the things that they wanted us to do when they wanted us to do it. So anyway, I just bring that up as we stuck to our guns, and it kind of goes to some of the stuff that you're saying. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was when you just were discussing othering. I'll put this in the chat. I'm in the middle of reading this book. I never thought of it that way, by Monica Guzman, and it's called How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times. And in terms of othering and everything, Lauren and Michael and Jan, and all the chat messages, I think some of you might enjoy this. So that's all I'm going to say. And thank you so much. And I look forward to attending more of these functions under another nonprofit's name. And this was marvelous. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just comment on what you said. It's interesting, the restrictions aspect of it. I find that to be particularly frustrating at times. To me, it feels like it's trust-based. It's like, really, you don't, and again, go back to that video. You don't trust me to get this done in the way I can. Now there may be real reasons why they have to do it, but if their communication isn't there, a lot of times it just feels like it's trust-based. We run into that when we submit on reimbursement-based contracts sometimes. I'm like, what do you think we're doing with this money? Why do you need all this extra documentation? And I don't want to get into other issues about the cumbersome nature of submitting for reimbursements and stuff, but some of that goes back to trust as well. It's like, this is an adequate receipt, but for someone who trusted me, right? So.
And I think that's such an important point, Michael. And to flip it again, is we as nonprofits, at least on a local level, have to trust our foundations and our funders. We can't wait until we're in a crisis mode or until things have gone a little south. I know, working with the foundations here, that if something isn't being actualized in the way that we spoke about it, we need to talk to our funders in advance when we know there's an issue, and explain it and have those open conversations and say, you know, we're funded for X to do this outcome. This is why it may not happen. And can we adjust things and see how we can work together too? So certainly trust on both sides is critical, as well. That is harder to do with a sort of non-entity, but here locally, I think it's very, a very realistic way of communicating. Lauren, did you want to say something?
No, that's it. I'm just super excited that we had a lot of people attending here, and we just have to continue getting the word out and sticking together and making the change that we all want to see.
So I see Catherine, you're up, and then if there are no other questions, we're going to close this most efficient presentation out and give people some time back in their day. So Catherine, please.
Oh, first of all, I wanted to thank everyone. Thank you. I'm leaving here with renewed enthusiasm about how to present certain things. We have, I think, a little bit of a different circumstance in that our organization supports people with cancer, and almost every person has had someone in their life who has had cancer. So we don't have people kind of, you know, thinking of this as an other group, that it couldn't happen to me. But what happens, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, that people think because, you know, a lot of times even funders and donors and board members think because we're doing something good and for a population that could hit anyone's life, that you don't need to have people, like you don't need the skill set. Anyone could just kind of jump in and do the job. And I would imagine other people face the same challenge. Like there's a perception that if you're doing something good and impacting lives and helping people get through a difficult time in their life, that you don't need to have quality. And that I find is very hard with the salaries and, you know, lack of benefits that we offer. It's difficult to attract and retain people now in today's world more than ever. And with that said, one of the challenges we have, because we don't have much government funding, does anyone have any ideas? How do you get to speak to funders when most of the applications are online and you just get a response, yes or no? And then when you reach out to say, could you help us kind of guide maybe why this could not be funded? The response is, you know, we usually about a budget or something else. So I don't know if anyone has any insight how to get to that point when you can't really talk to a person.
So I would recommend, the first thing I would recommend is that grant professionals of the Lower Hudson and the Association of Development Officers, I forget the date, but they are having a funders panel on, is it October 19th? Maybe it's October 19th. I think
yeah,
that
we're going to that. Yeah.
I think that would be a great thing to go to. I also think it would be really beneficial to reach out to somebody at grant professionals of the Lower Hudson to have these conversations. And maybe this is something, you know, maybe this is a change, or maybe this is an issue that, you know, not only you have, but others have. And then, you know, with respect to the foundations, they operate in a way that allows them to disperse money and disperse investments in a way that is effective. And so some foundations have practices that may not work for everyone, but certainly work for the recipients that they have. So we have to be careful, I guess, about being too critical of how foundations operate. Some need to operate the way they do. But I'm sure you can get insights from grant professionals of the Lower Hudson, and they have a great team of volunteer grant writers that are always willing to speak to people and help out as well. And just an FYI, in 2024, We already have planned another learning lab on grant prospecting. And the question you just asked will certainly be covered in that learning lab.
I have one other suggestion, that if you look at the 990 for the foundation and see who they've funded, and reach out to that other nonprofit and ask them what their process was, especially if they're an NPW member and it's member to member. This is our best support group right here. 70, more than 70 of us that Jan has brought together. And, you know, we should be using each other for those kinds of questions, because often there is something about the foundation that isn't necessarily written in their guidelines, but it helps to know, how did somebody get funded? What do they think was their, you know, magic formula?
Yeah, that's very, very helpful. Thank you. Thank you all.
And I think Nancy brings up an important point. We need to collaborate. We need to support each other. You know, the sort of competitive nature that we're all in, that we don't want to give away our secrets, and we don't want to give away our information to each other, is harmful. We need to work together. It will create a stronger sector, a stronger fabric, and at the end of the line is a client that we want to help. And so if we're committed to that, we need to work together. So I encourage people to share information and not to hoard it because it's good for your organization. We have to be generous and caring of each other as well.
Philip has his hand raised.
Oh, Phil, go ahead.
Hey, good morning, everyone. This has been fantastic, and I believe that there is power in collaboration. But I want to bring a downside. One of my government funders are not fully committed to the grants. We were entitled to a 5-year grant. They cut us off after 4 years. And then with another one of their grants, they put it back out to RFP, because what they wanted to do was to allow brand new agencies to come up, because they know that they could do it cheaper. So they're also pitting us against each other. And so therefore, it's almost putting us in a position to see, well, we can do it for less. And that's one of our biggest issues right now, because then that comes back with retainage of our staff, because I can only offer, $7, and knowing that's, they can also go to that government and work for them for $10. So that's one of our biggest issues right now, is that a lot of our government agencies are pitting us against each other.
Yeah, and that is a crucial point and something that we're working on. And again, it's something that benefits historically larger and white-run organizations. And it is something that we are working on as well. Change is going to happen, and it's going to be, it's going to, what do they say? It's a marathon, not a sprint. So to use a cliche, it will definitely be a marathon. And we are so glad to have all of you on Team NPW for the marathon. And again, I want to thank Lauren and Michael for just working so hard on this and giving so much of their time, which, by the way, is not covered by any grants.
This is a core expense. The hour and a half I've been here.
Right. And we know it took a lot more time than that to
right.
put this together. And for those of you who do have influence and inroads into other organizations, we here in Westchester do have suffer a little bit reputationally from Westchester, such a rich county. NPW represents, you know what I'm talking about. This presentation to me just excites me. And I feel that organizations throughout New York State would benefit from this. So if you have connections to other organizations, please use them. I do want to acknowledge that Meg Allen from the New York Council of Nonprofits was on this Zoom. She had to leave due to an emergency, but we are starting to work together more. We will work together more with the New York Council of Nonprofits, and we will bring our expertise and our Westchester brilliance, to organizations that want to hear from us as well. So with that, thank you to all of you for your time and for your work. And I hope to see you on November 9th. And before that, at everything we have to offer here at Nonprofit Westchester. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Lauren and Michael, can you stay on for a couple
Sure.
more minutes?